看气象，关注天气，知冷暖，享受生活。观众朋友们，晚上好。受到东移云带的影响，今天白天我市天空云量较多，并且达到了阴天的程度。由于光照很差呢，气温也是有所下降的。在今天下午14点，城区气温呢大多是在7度左右，较昨天降低了5到6度。预计今天夜间我市将有零星的雨夹雪。那新的一周就要来到了，预计下周呢冷空气活动会比较频繁，但是强度不大。其中24、26和28号呢都会有3、4级的偏北风，气温将会稳步的下降。在明天早晨上班上学的时候，天气为阴天见多云，微风，气温是1到3度。那早上出行的时候一定要注意防寒保暖。而傍晚天气是以多云为主的，偏北风2、3级，气温是6到4度，天气仍然偏冷。再来看一看其他时段的具体预报。今天夜间阴天见多云，有零星小雨夹雪，南转北风1、2级，最低气温是1度。明天白天阴天，北部地区有零星小雪转多云，偏北风2、3见4级，最高气温是8度。明天白天天空云量较多，风力稍大，但早晚的气温呢是比较低的。总体看来天气偏冷，您在外出的时候一定要注意添衣保暖。在未来2天，我市没有明显的降雪和大风的天气，这样的天气条件呢是有利于车辆的保洁，所以是比较适宜大家擦洗车辆的。
京城第一锅，请您收看全国主要城市。
By the opposition, including royalists, the urban middle class elite, and union activists.
Asia-Pacific leaders wrap up a summit in Lima today, during which they vowed a united front against the world financial crisis. The 21 leaders rallied around the economic crisis plan forged last week at the G20 meeting in Washington and promised to refrain from raising trade barriers over the next 12 months. They'll also push for a global free trade deal and to reform international lenders. James Agilia reports.
Free trade and no protectionism. That's what the 21 leaders from Asia, Australasia, and the Americas said would help the world get out of the global economic crisis. And they committed to try to reach a breakthrough in the stalled Doha round of trade talks before the end of this year. The leaders argued their case with free trade success stories. South Korean President Lee Myung-bak said open markets were central to boosting his nation's per capita annual income from $100 in the 1960s to $20,000 today. Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who signed free trade agreements with Peru and Colombia, said the North American Free Trade Agreement has tripled trade and created 40 million jobs.
We cannot allow ourselves to turn back. Now is the time for opening doors, not for erecting walls.
U.S. President George W. Bush chastised Congress for not following the same path.
We've concluded agreements with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. And it is extremely disappointing that the United States Congress adjourned without passing these 3 great agreements.
And that may not change. U.S. President-elect Barack Obama and the Democratic-controlled Congress are wary of those bilateral and global trade agreements. The negotiations to conclude the World Trade Organization's long-suffering Doha round of global trade talks started 7 years ago. But it is still far from completed and has suffered a number of setbacks. The leaders also supported overhauls of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank at a time when more countries need emergency bailouts to avert economic devastation. Japan said last week it was ready to lend up to $100 billion to the IMF, but China has so far resisted calls to dig into its nearly $2 trillion in reserves. James Logilia, TVB News.
And meanwhile, President Hu Jintao continued to press for a more coordinated global effort to overcome deepening economic challenges at the APEC summit. And Hong Kong Chief Executive Donald Tsang called on world leaders not to retreat from commitments to further liberalize trade and investment. Emma Jones reports.
President Hu Jintao was greeted by this year's APEC host, Peruvian President Alan Garcia, at the Defense Ministry compound in Lima. At an unofficial summit meeting in the Peruvian capital, President Hu Jintao urged the APEC business community to have more confidence and to make a coordinated effort to overcome economic challenges. To play its part and to help achieve its development, Hu said China needs an international environment of peace, stability and cooperation and will contribute its part to fostering such an environment. President Hu met with Peru's Chinese embassy staff. Chief Executive Donald Zhang was also present. There, who spoke about China's development, saying despite the long road ahead, Chinese people will unswervingly carry forward reform and opening up. In his address to APEC leaders, Chief Executive Donald Tsang appealed to them not to